video, I'm going to show you how to build an effective survey. So, what is the difference between a survey and a form? To me, the core difference really comes down to two things. Number one, you do not have to present all of the information in one linear format. The second thing is the ability to qualify or disqualify people based on their answers, as well as ask separate questions to individuals based on their answer to specific questions. So, as a whole, I really enjoy using surveys for anything that's going to collect a good amount of information. And most importantly, anytime I want to qualify someone for something. Forms have their place. I use forms a lot, but surveys, again, are really great for those two things. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of my surveys today. I'm going to show you how to edit this survey. I'm going to walk you through the conditional logic of qualifying or disqualifying someone, how to have additional follow-up questions for those based on their specific answer. And we'll just go over the basics of surveys as a whole. So this is called my pre-call survey. This is the survey that I use before someone is able to book on our calendar. The reason for this is a 45-minute to 1-hour call. We want to make sure that the people on this call are qualified to be there because my team is taking a good amount of time out of their day for this conversation. So we want to save the person on the other end time if they're not actually a good fit, if it's not the right time for them. And we want to save ourselves time as well. We want to make sure that we are only speaking with those that are truly qualified. So I'll walk you through the different items that are in my survey, and then we'll go through how to add an additional question or follow-up question, things like that. The first thing we need to know is just about the survey elements. There are really two core aspects of surveys. We've got our survey elements, which as you saw, I click on that plus sign to get there. And then we have styles and options on the right-hand side. Those are really the main things you need to know. You're going to go ahead and give your survey a name just by clicking here. Mine is already called pre-call survey. So these quick add elements are some of the things that you see right here. So we have name, email, number, business name, and URL. So as you can see, I have a different label to my question. So full name is the name of the field, but my label said, what's your name? So I use full name as the placeholder, but I like to customize the labels as much as possible. I also ask, what is the best email address to reach you, not just simply email address. People can have more than one email, so I find it really effective to be as specific as possible. And then, sadly, email doesn't always go through. What's your cell phone number? So I'm not just asking for phone number. I want to make sure it's a cell phone number as we will be sending text reminders for the call. I assume you want to talk business. What's yours called? So instead of organization name, which is generic and boring, again, I like to make this more conversational. And then what's the website so I can learn more about it? Website URL goes here. So again, we can drag these fields over. It is a drag and drop builder. Okay, so we just drag them over and we can customize what they say. So I'm going to drag address. I'm not going to keep this on here, but we'll take a look. So it just says address. I could say, what is your office address? Okay, and if I want to make this question required, I'm going to hit required. We can also make this question hidden. So making a question hidden can mean that if other information has been filled out in the past, we can actually have that information pass through, or we can go ahead and give this field a value. So there are certain situations in which we'd want to do that. We're not going to cover that in this video, but those are some of the options we have. Then we've got our placeholder. So it'll say insert office address. So you can customize both of those. The query key is important as this is how you would actually get this answer into something like an email notification if you wanted this information sent to you. So we are not going to mess with the query key, and I'm not going to save this, but if I did, I was going to hit that save button right up at the top. So that's how simple it is to add a quick add question. So all of these things here are just the basic contact information you'd normally be collecting. Then we also have these customize options. So this right here is one of those options. This is a text box. So these are things that do not necessarily go along with your questions. They are additional elements. So we can add HTML code. We can add an image, we can do CAPTCHA, source, or TNC, which is terms and conditions. So now that we have to be A2P compliant for everything for text messaging, this is definitely a field that you're going to want to add to your forms if you do not already have them. You can add them to your surveys as well. So I don't need to add that on this form because I've got my terms and conditions in my calendar itself. So if I wanted to add an image, same thing. I'm going to drag that over. We're going to go ahead and choose that file and insert that if we want to do that. So that is the way that I did this image right here. So it is a great idea to use these customized options to build your surveys. So whenever you start your survey, you're only going to have this one slide. This plus button right here adds additional slides. When you have different slides, it will move from one slide to the next in the order that those slides are presented, unless you change that order, which we're going to talk about in this video. So the first slide that I have is what is their current monthly revenue? So this is not the only important question, but this is a very important question. So we created this question as a checkbox. In order to create your own questions, you're going to go to this custom fields tab here on the left. And we are either going to take a custom field that we've already got, and you can see I have a ton of custom fields, and we're going to click this Add Custom Fields button at the bottom. Now we have the option to select the type of custom field that we want. So this is really important for surveys because if you want to use conditional logic, you can't select just anything. So I would select drop down, single, or checkbox typically. So there are a few others that you can use for that, but drop down, single, or checkbox is what I'd recommend if you plan on doing conditional logic. Even if you don't plan on doing conditional logic, I still find that drop down single, drop down multiple, checkbox are really good field types because it's going to standardize your answers. And if you want to evaluate your data really easily, standardizing your answers is the simplest way to do that. So if you want to create different paths or different actions in your workflows based on how someone answers a specific question, even if they're all going to be qualified, it's not going to disqualify anyone, but you want to say, okay, I want to put these people in different buckets based on their situation. You can do that if you're using those options. If you just use single line, multiple line, things like that, those answers will not be standardized and you really can't do that. So I always find before you do a form or a survey, particularly a survey, it is a great idea to pre-plan the questions that you are going to ask and the answers that you would really use to make decisions or that would impact what happens next with this person. When in doubt, I think it's always best to use something like drop down single, multiple, or checkbox so that you at least have the option in the future to use those as conditional logic or to allow different actions to happen to people or people to be categorized based on their specific answers. So we're going to go ahead and do drop down single. Then we're going to click next. And this is a new field that I'm going to add. I'm not going to add it just yet, but we'll go ahead and create this. So this field is going to be, what do you consider to be a well-funded startup? Okay, so this could be the name of my question, but I don't know if that's exactly how I want to ask this. I'm going to say, how much funding does your startup have access to? And this will make more sense as we get into the survey, but this is just the process of creating a question. So now we have the object. The object is going to be the contact. If you want this information saved to a contact individually, but we also have the option to select opportunity. Now we've got group. So this is required that we put a group. Contact is going to be in the first section of contact information when you are looking at a contact. Then there's going to be a general info and an additional info section. Okay, these are default folders that are already there when you create your account. But we also have two additional. We have marketing/coaching, and then we have setter bot as these different folders that we personally have created. So if you only see contact, general info, and additional info, that's fine. Just know you do have the opportunity to create your own sections of information. So for example, if you had an onboarding form, you could create an onboarding folder in your custom fields. You could save all the answers to the onboarding survey in that section so you always know where all the questions are when you're looking at a specific contact. So we are just going to do additional info for this one. So you've just got to select one regardless. And then under the option name, we are going to go ahead and give this an option. So it's a single option drop down, which means they can only select one. So we're going to say up to $10,000. I'm going to say, no, we're going to say $10,000, $5,000 to $10,000 will be one of them. We're going to do 0 through $5,000. And I'm actually going to drag this one up to the top. So it's just, again, a drag and drop builder, or at least it's supposed to be. So we're going to go ahead and delete this one and just add it back. We will do $5,000 to $10,000. Okay. And now I'm going to do $10,000 through 20,000. We will do 20,000 through, we'll just go 50,000 and 50,000 plus. Ultimately, the rest of these answers are more for informational purposes. Only a few of them are going to disqualify people. So again, like I said before, even if something is going to not necessarily disqualify someone, if you want to put people in buckets based on what their answers are, still good to go ahead and do those additional answers. So then we'll just do 50,000 plus. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now I've got this new question. Okay, so what happens after we save that is it's going to pop up at the bottom. It can take a couple of seconds for that to happen. And so that can be a little frustrating. Sometimes you're like, I just added it, but I don't see it. Give it a second, try and scroll down all the way, and you should see it right here. If for some reason it does not show up, which there are occasionally some glitches with forms and surveys and things like that, just go ahead and save and then refresh your screen, and then you should see that no problem. You also have the ability to go ahead and go to custom fields, which is in the settings of the sub account. Go ahead and create all your questions at once in the custom fields area. You don't have to do it while you're building your form or survey, but you definitely can do that. So now I've got this current question that I'm on. And if we look to the right, we'll see that this is required, and you'll see my different options. So what happens when people select these options? If they put 0 to 2,000, we go to slide 3, which is titled low monthly income. They do 2 to 5, we also do low monthly income. Everything else goes to the same slide, which is target monthly income. So you might be thinking, why didn't you just do 0 to 5,000 and then 5,000 plus? Because again, it's good for us to know where people are, even if it's not going to change the outcome of what happens next. We still want to know those things. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. This is my low monthly income slide. So if I click here, it'll say, to help me better understand your monthly income, tell me which best describes your situation. Now on the right, we've got a few options. I'm a startup who wants to grow, but I don't have much startup capital. This is somebody that we're going to have to disqualify after submit. And the reason for that is that ultimately we work with a lot of startups, but they have to have money to invest in their business for it to make sense for us to get on a call with them. If they are saying they're a well-funded startup and they're looking to crush it from the start, we move them then to target monthly revenue. So that was the same answer that half of these moved on to already. So we're getting people back in the same path. Then we've got this business is a side hustle and I don't need to make much. We disqualify after submit. And then the rest of those go to target monthly revenue. It doesn't mean that everyone on this slide goes to low monthly income. We selected on the right-hand side where they go next. It's going to give you the option to select any slide. So this is very important if you are creating a survey that's going to have different paths like this, that you title these individual slides based on what you're asking. And so in order to do that, we click on this 3-dot menu, we go to settings. We're going to give that slide a name because, as you can imagine, it can get really confusing if you're just looking at slide numbers, and especially if you're going to be reorganizing them, or maybe one slide goes to another slide that's 3 questions down. So naming those is really important. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new slide. I'm adding this slide based on what we've seen in the last couple of months. So, a pre qualification survey for me is a really important thing. And I don't make changes to it just based on, oh, I think this would be cool. I do it based on what is really happening in my business. And so I need to add this additional question. So recently we've gotten enough people on calls that it's made me add this question that have said in their survey that they are a well-funded startup looking to crush it from the start when in fact they might have $1 to $2,000 to invest, which again, we have options for that, but those are not options that they need a call to learn about. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I will actually get this same image back into my slide, but we'll just focus on this first. So how much funding does your startup have access to? So I'm going to make this required. Keep in mind that if you make one of these required, yet it's not a question that everyone has to go through, that's okay. It's only required for the people who hit this slide. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the name just to keep this organized. And this is startup funding. I'm going to click here. And if they select 0 to 5,000, then we are going to disqualify after submit. If they select 5 to 10,000, we're going to move them to target monthly revenue, target monthly revenue, target monthly revenue. Ultimately, this answer could be something that is further tweaked moving forward. So, based on what I see happening on this survey, if we find that everybody that selects this option typically only has about 5,000, which is on the low end of some of the options that we would typically be discussing on calls, I might come back into this survey and tweak it. Again, asking an additional follow-up question, perhaps. And so this is a living, breathing survey that is changing based on real world data. So this is the only one right now that we're going to disqualify after submit. But I need to go back and I need to change the answers on this one. So if they say I'm a well-funded startup looking to crush it from the start, instead of taking them to target monthly revenue, I'm going to take them to startup funding, which is right here. And then based on startup funding, these 4 are going to move forward and then the rest will not. So on my placeholder, we're going to go ahead and say, what does well funded startup mean to you? And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So in saving this survey, this is automatically updating it in the pages that it is used. I don't have to go and reinsert that. It's just going to go ahead and update that. So again, I will get this image back into the slide so everything is uniform. But I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So if you are looking for different options for the text or the padding, things like that, we are going to be able to do that on the Styles tab. So we have different styles. We've got lines and we have boxes. So boxes are what you would typically see in a survey. Lines are more like a type form style. So it just has that underline and then you can go ahead and select your answer there. We also have background colors, borders, dashed border, solid border, no border at all, corner radius, padding, margin, etc. And then we also have the field style. We can change the font color, border, corner radius, etc. right there. We've got labels. So if I wanted to change this to 16-point font to make it bigger, which I just did, we're going to do that. And now for the label, I'm going to change that to 14. Our placeholder is already 14 and everything looks pretty good. So you can change this text down here, that previous and next, say back, and this still says next. Then we've got the submit text that's going to say schedule my call, or we're going to say select my call time, or we'll do select call time, see if that works. That looks like it works. We could do a background image for the survey itself or a header image for the survey itself. And then this agency branding is going to be the branding of your agency level account. So I'm going to turn that off. I have that off on almost everything. And then I'm going to go ahead again and hit save. So that is the process of creating new fields, of qualifying or disqualifying. But now the question might be, what happens if they're qualified or disqualified? So again, we'll just take a look at this options panel, which is going to be this menu on the far right. The styles and the themes, this is the visual. Okay. So take a look at those. You can do a lot of really nice stuff now. That is a huge improvement that's been made over the last year. But this options tab is where we decide what happens after someone fills out this survey. So we've already got a name. It's called pre-call survey. And then on submit, we are going to select open URL. By default, it is on message, which is a success message. It means they stay on the exact same page, but after that survey is submitted, it says, thanks, you're all set, or something like that. Okay. I always send people to another URL. It's better for tracking, but it's also better for the user experience because you can be more descriptive. You can tell them really what happens next. So we go to open URL and we're going to select the URL that someone who is qualified is going to go to. For me, it's this URL, but that only happens if they're qualified. So now we have two other options. We have disqualify immediately and disqualify after submit. So those both were options in that drop down. So if I click over here, we'll take a look. We've got this disqualify after submit. There's a disqualify immediately right there. The reason that I typically never do disqualify immediately is because I still want to collect that information. If you disqualify immediately, that form never submits, so you never actually get that information. If this is something where if they answer this way, you do not even care to collect the lead at all, just disqualify immediately. But for me personally, it's never something that I do. Very specific cases, so I won't really get into that in this video. But for some unique survey funnels, we've done that. But ultimately, it's always either going to be on submit or disqualify after submit. So then I've got disqualify after submit, and the same thing. By default, it's going to be on message, but we are going to put a URL in there. So for me, that URL says, hey, doesn't look like you're ready for a call just yet. Here is a free training that'll give you some great information on what you can do to grow your business. Here are some lower ticket items, essentially some digital products, courses that might be a better fit for you at this time. So we still want to leave people in a positive manner. We don't want to be like, oh, looks like you're not big enough to work with us. That's not it at all. It is from a time perspective, it wouldn't be a good use of their time or our time for us to meet on this call, but we still have options that can help them. So this page is going to direct them to those options. We've got our Facebook Pixel ID, which you could put here. I always embed surveys, forms, and calendars on a page. I'm never just sending someone the link to that calendar, survey, or form on its own, which you can do, and we'll take a look at that in a second. I always embed it on a page. I want to have my branding. I want to control the way the page looks. And again, for tracking purposes, that's what I like to do. So this is if you are only sending someone that direct link, but I already have my pixel code in my funnel, so I don't need it right here. This is if you want something to happen on submit with that Facebook pixel. Again, all of those things are set up in my account separately, but if you're just putting your pixel ID, you can go ahead and do something like this. And now under our survey settings, we've got one question at a time, which we could turn on and it would still present them one question at a time without slides. I personally, for the sake of organization, like to break them up in slides. And I'm still doing, as you can see, one question at a time on almost every slide except for this very first one. That is a personal preference. Then we can disable the auto navigation. That would be the back and the next. I don't want to do that. Sticky contact means that if somebody's already submitted a form, if they've already submitted certain pieces of information, that information is going to autofill. So that would be things like full name, email, cell phone, etc. But any questions that they have never provided to me, those are not going to be autofilled. So it can save some time. I do turn on sticky contact on a lot of my forms and surveys. That's also personal preference. Then we've got scroll to the top. If this is turned on, the survey is going to scroll to the top on the next slide. I don't need this on my slide. You might find that you do on yours. It's really up to you. We can do GDPR compliant font. This font is just fine, so I'm not going to worry about that. And then enable contact time zone. So I don't ask about time zone on this survey. This is turned on by default, so I'm going to leave it on. Not really a big deal. Then again, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So now, how do I get this form or survey somewhere? We're going to click on this integrate button, and we have two different options. The first one is embed. So you can embed this in any web page. Then we have link. This is the link directly to this survey. So as I mentioned, I embed my forms and surveys and calendars into funnel pages. So I never use this link, but I also don't have to use the embed code. The embed code is if really you are not using this system's funnel builders or website builders, because we have an element in the funnel builder or website builder for surveys. So all we have to do is drag and drop the survey element. We can select this survey. But if you're using a WordPress site or something else, you can embed this into that site. So all of your leads are still coming into the system. You can still tie an external site into this system. So that is definitely something that many people have to use. So again, gonna go ahead and give that a save to make sure we're good to go. And we are ready with this new updated pre-call survey. So hopefully that helps, and drop your questions in the comments. Let me know, what are the biggest questions or challenges that you have had with surveys, and will you consider implementing a pre-qualification survey in your business? I'd love to know. See you on the next one.